Hello and welcome to Random Walk, a sciencey podcast where we take multiple steps of unit length, each with directions selected independently from the previous step. I'm your host, Adam Fortis. Yeah, so
Hi, Adam.
I don't know, whatever that means. I could tell you what our random walk for the week is if you guys are interested. I didn't announce this at the beginning. I should have said it. We have some guests today. This is going to be a slight departure from the already slight departure from the random walk format. We have some guests, Colin,
So
Ben,
long.
Andrew. Do you want to hear the random walk for the week?
Should we introduce ourselves?
He introduced us, but we can.
Like, more formally? Well, actually, you know what I wanted to mention? I just kind of wanted to throw this as a tidbit. Are you still using Consternation for this show?
I have been, yes.
Because you have 3 members of Boonie on the call.
Damn! That's a good call.
3 out of 5?
Yeah, you've gotten a lot of radio play over on CFMU 93.3.
Nice.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for...
I just thought it would be kind of fun to...
Yeah, that's a good call, yeah. Good point. So yeah, that's a brief little intro to who we have as guests. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them shortly. They're here for a very specific reason. But before we get to that, I'll just quickly say what our random walk for the week is. It comes from economics and a level 1 model for understanding how price fluctuations of a stock work is the random walk. Andrew, actually, this might be something up your alley. So in very approximate terms, say one Scientific Canada stock has a true intrinsic value of $10. In a perfect world, all intelligent, logical investors have all of the same information and would come to the same conclusion that $10 is fair. So you'll probably see the price as $10 if you were to go buy some. But things are not always so cut and dry. So more than likely, even with all the same information, some intelligent, logical investors will disagree about this $10. Some will think it's higher than 10. Some will think it's lower than 10. Basically, since the true value is 10 and most people think it's 10, and there's like a small group of people forcing it up, small group of people forcing it down, then what this random walk idea is it'll sit around 10 and just randomly fluctuate back and forth. So it can go up by a couple cents, and then basically randomly a 50-50 chance of it going down again or up again. So you can get significant drift of the price. You can get it to go to, say, $3 or something like that, but it's highly unlikely, and usually you'll find it in that special little spot. So that's your random walk for this week. This is similar to the one from last week, the drunkard's walk. That's the canonical example where a drunk man or woman comes out of a bar, wants to get home. They have a 50-50 chance of going left or right down the street, and each step they have another 50-50 chance, and so most likely they don't get home. They usually just end up at the bar. Okay. So that's your little connection for the week. Now that that's over, let's get into the first and probably the only segment we're going to do this week. We're going to talk video games for a little bit. So the people you heard earlier, Colin, Ben, Andrew, 2 out of the 3 are from This Podcast Cannot Continue, a video game podcast where Colin and Ben talk about video games. That kind of makes sense, right?
That makes sense.
And as alluded to, 3 out of 3 are members of Boonie, who have graciously let me use their music for years and years and years. I don't know if everybody from Boonie knows that I do this, but but thank you. So yeah, Ben, Colin, tell me about your show. Tell me about This Podcast Cannot Continue. What do you guys do?
Colin, do you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah. So I guess I introduce it usually as a podcast about video games by 2 friends. The original goal was we had this ambitious idea to bring 2 topics each week and not tell each other about it, and then explore these topics, just anything about games in general. It could be specific games, it could be design elements, it could be news, whatever, really. Just we're two big game fans. We're having all these conversations on our own when we were playing online games and stuff together, and we kind of were like, we should just try our hand at recording these. It might be fun. The format has shifted. Now we usually do 2 topics, and on a couple of occasions we've actually wanted to talk about the same thing, which has been kind of fun. But so
weird.
But so there's no prep. There's prep on like each side, but not for both topics. So it's always kind of like a little bit of a surprise in both halves. And then at the end, we like to talk about backlog, because we're both two people that have a lot of games to play and not enough time. So it's just if you like games, if you like design, if you like talking about like or listening to people talk about at length, just like general kind of thing.
I would say the topics are conceptual, like a lot of the time, more so than like, do you like this game? I like this game. Like, it's not really like that as much as it is usually about like conceptual things, industry news events, or game design type of things, anything like that. It's all fair game.
Sometimes it's like a really surprising topic. Like one that I would plug is Ben came to me with a topic that was just exploring the trope of the JRPG jailbreak sequence.
I love that one.
Extremely, which is really prevalent. So that was fun, because that was like exploring like a narrative device used in like a very specific genre. And I didn't see that one coming at all, and I had a blast with that topic, because I was like, it just it gets the gears turning, and you
it was fun. It was a fun.
Yeah, I don't play a ton of games, but I love listening to your show, because it seems like it's so broadly like there's so many topics that are broadly applicable and just interesting, from storytelling to gamer culture. That's kind of a cringy term, I think, but like the culture of technology interested people.
It is what we're talking about when we talk about that, though, right? Like, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because when we say gamer culture, like, I think a lot of the time people think of like the Mountain Dew and Doritos kind of like online Twitch chat kind of like thing, and sometimes that is in a way what we're talking about. Like, we've talked about things like toxicity and stuff like that, but like at the same time, sometimes we're literally just talking about, I don't know, the ways that people tend to think about games, which maybe isn't really like gamer culture in this stereotypical sense, but like if that's what we're talking about, then that's what we're talking about. I think it's an applicable term.
Every once in a while, we also do hilariously long episodes. If you ever need to kill like a long amount of time, we do occasionally these list episodes that go on just forever.
We don't hold ourselves to a time limit.
Yeah, that's a real that's a real sometimes thing. But those are fun to check out, because I hope they're fun to check out. They're a lot of fun to me.
Once every 10 episodes, I think, because that's the pattern, right? It only takes It only takes 2 points to draw a line, right? So you've done 2 list episodes.
I'm very excited for the one we have at 30. It's a little bit different than the way we did the last 2.
We do things a little bit different around here.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think the lists are the only thing we kind of sort of plan ahead. As soon as one's done, we've talked about the next one, just because we like to get our ducks in a row, more or less.
Andrew, where do you come in? Where do you come in on gaming? Do you play video games? What's your deal?
I partake in I was gonna say the fruit of the vine, but I don't really know what to call it.
So
I knew it was worth bringing you on just for this alone.
So I used to live I used to live a lot with Andrew. Andrew and I were roommates for a very long time. High school sweethearts, played in bands together. One of my fondest memories of undergrad would be waking up and asking Andrew to play Harvest Moon so I could watch.
Tradition which continues on, or would continue on to this day if there were any good Harvest Moons out for the Switch.
I'm not like, I think Harvest Moon is pretty cool, but it's not really something that I've engaged with that much. Maybe I should.
I liked the one on the GameCube. It was the only one where you actually play a dude's whole life, and at the end you die.
Oh my god!
Wholesome.
It was kind of
Did we
dark.
talk about this? I feel like we talked about this on.
If you fail to get married in the game, you also lose, because apparently Natsume has decided that being single your entire life is tantamount to basically there's no worth in continuing.
Oh my. That is, I don't actually agree with that.
I think they're just being realistic about life on the farm. It's too much for one single person.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly.
Depends what kind of farm.
That's
I don't really have a joke to go with that or anything. Just wanted to say.
Neither do I.
So
I've never farmed.
There's a gamer term.
Loot farm.
Yeah, there you go. Loot farm. That's our sponsor for this week, Loot Farm.
Sponsor? Is that an organization?
No, I don't know.
I've never heard
I'm not
of
going to Google it. Don't type it in anywhere. I don't know. So yeah, I brought these fellas onto the show for a very specific reason. So I read a lot of news stuff. I get my news from Twitter, get my news from Google. Google often recommends me things based on what I've looked at before. And for some reason, I think it's because I've been listening to your shows. I've been getting more and more video game related things, but also knows that I like science.
Oh.
So it pushed this one article from, I think it was nintendolife.com or something like that, website I didn't know existed, that said cosmic rays may have screwed with some Mario 64 speedrunner. So, okay, I'm intrigued. So I brought you guys on to be the experts here. Tell me about video games. That wasn't the prompt or the question.
Okay, I was going to say that's broad. It's software that is for entertainment.
It all started with Space War in the late 60s.
It's software for hardware that you set up in your living room.
True. I'm not in the
Consoles.
living room, though.
It's a room that you do live in, though.
My games are in here, but this isn't a living room, so...
It's the thriving room.
Thriving room, yeah. Okay, so that wasn't the prompt, and yet we all responded to it.
Right, so my understanding here is... So, level 1. Mario is an Italian plumber who has to save princesses. Level 2, some people play video games and try to get through them as quickly as possible. The level 3 is this person who was playing was competing, is my understanding, to complete the game as quickly as possible. And then something that did not make any sense whatsoever happened to the game, shocking the world. So far, we all agree? So far...
Yeah, that's like this rough skeleton of the story. Yeah, did you say that the event dislodged the world record? There was something that you said that cut out. I didn't quite catch.
Oh, not dislodged. I think it was a beneficial mistake.
So it could be beneficial. I don't necessarily think it actually was during the race that the player was playing in. I could actually explain why too.
Okay.
But, if you want to just continue first, I can come around back to that.
Yeah, so I really would like to paint a picture of what exactly happened on this video game. So could you sort of explain what it is that these players saw? Like, what were they sort of doing? And, yeah.
Yeah, okay, sure. So speedrunning is a form of competitive gaming that doesn't strictly involve games that are actually competitive in nature. Right? So usually when you speedrun, you're speedrunning a game that is actually like a single player experience, but you're making it into a form of multiplayer experience either by way of using a leaderboard, right? Or by like racing somebody simultaneously. And what these players were doing was they were doing a race, and it was just the two of them, if I'm not mistaken. And what happened was... they were, or well, I don't necessarily know that they were in the same spot. So the player whose username was Dota_Teabag was in TikTok Clock, which is a level in Super Mario 64. Every level in Super Mario 64 has a star that is earned by collecting 8 red coins. And in TikTok Clock, there are these sort of tilting or rotating kind of tilting platforms that are up against a wall at the edge of the level. And you have to kind of deal with the fact that they'll tilt back and forth under your weight and use that to your advantage to make your way up the wall. And all 8 coins are in that area of the level. So you collect them and you get your star, which will progress you in your speedrun, right? So what actually happened was when Dota Teabag was collecting his red coins, at one point he landed on one of the platforms. And the moment that Mario landed on that platform for some reason that they had yet to determine. He was like very rapidly, nearly instantaneously shot straight upwards, and then he fell down onto the topmost platform that's like above that space of the level. Okay, and very quickly, the reason why I say that maybe in that particular run it wasn't beneficial is because now he has to go back down to get the rest of his 8 red coins. So it would have cost some time on that specific goal. But the reason it's so interesting to Super Mario 64 speedrunners is because if they can find out how and why that happened, there might be other places in the game where they can apply it and make a gain. So it's more advanced thinking about what could be done from in the rest of the game if they understand how this one was done, which is why it's like of such interest to Super Mario 64 speedrunners. So that kind of covers the actual event during the speed run, during the speed race that happened. Do you want to like kind of take over from there? Do you have more details?
Yeah. So one of the points or the questions I was going to ask about that is, so there was some benefit to this happening, potential benefit at least, some like strong interest from the gaming community about this error or whatever, because they could get some benefit from it, which is why it wasn't just this weird thing happened, like, oh, my Microsoft Word just shut down. I don't know why. Oh well, let's just restart it.
There was actually a bounty. Are you aware of that? Okay, so a YouTuber and also Super Mario 64 speedrunner and challenge runner, who goes by the username Panenkoic2012. I think it's pancake in another language. I'm not 100% sure. Panen posted on his YouTube channel 6 years ago a $1,000 bounty if you can reproduce the glitch.
Oh wow!
So
that's cool.
In Super Mario 64, there's a lot of like upwarp and downwarp type glitches. Ones that send you downward really fast are actually so common that a lot of players will sometimes unintentionally encounter them in like a casual playthrough of the game. It can kind of happen where Mario will, after interacting with some piece of like the level terrain, will get sent downward very, very quickly, right? And I know that speedrunners do use those ones a considerable amount of the time. Upward ones do exist already that they do know how to perform, but the conditions are extremely specific. So the conditions are completely different, and therefore really interesting to speedrunners, because if they can learn what those conditions are and where else it might be applicable in the game if it was reproducible, it could open up the chance to skip other parts of other levels, which is really what speedrunning in a lot of cases ends up being all about. Because if you're trying to complete the game as fast as possible, then progressing through something while skipping large portions of it is going to save you a lot of time.
Interesting. Okay. Andrew, Colin, have you guys played this game? Have you? Do you know much about TikTok Clock? Is that your favorite level?
Andrew, you sounded familiar with it, though.
I've played it, but I've never harnessed the power of the sun's rays to my benefit.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're alluding to. So they think that they figured out how this happened. So I was gonna ask. When something bizarre happens in an experiment or whatever, you just like repeat it a couple times and you make some theories and whatever, and then see if repeating it works. How do you go about trying to diagnose this kind of problem?
So there's a specific set of
I
steps,
don't even know where you would start with that.
Speedrunners would use in order to achieve something like this. The first step that you would do is you would perform the glitch. If you found a way to reproduce it, I'm kind of going to work backwards here, right? So you would perform the glitch. You would do it in an emulator, which is a type of software that acts essentially as if it is the game console, the game system, but it's in software. And the reason why you want to do this is because you can see using an emulator a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes. You have like debug options and stuff like that. And provided that the emulator, which these are generally fan-made and not released by like the developers, right? They kind of exist in a bit of a gray area. But provided that the emulator is accurate enough, you'd be able to perform the glitch in an emulator, save that game input that you did to perform the glitch as like a type of replay file that will just replay those button inputs for you. Set that on like a looping playback in the emulator and analyze the game code step by step, find like which actual like line of the code or element of the code is causing the glitch, and by being able to spot that out and find it, you can determine what requirements would have needed to be met for the glitch to occur, whether those are input requirements, the memory on the console, like RAM to be in a certain state, or anything like that. The issue is they can't do any of those steps because nobody can reproduce the glitch. So what people have done is there's something that's called tool-assisted speedrunning, and it's a version of speedrunning that is also typically built on an emulator. And I mentioned recording the inputs, right? So if you're playing a game and you're pressing buttons on a controller, you can record a sequence of inputs and in some cases send that back to the game, whether that be on an emulator or the real console. And in doing so, what some people like to do, who aren't your traditional type of speedrunner, where you just try to beat the game as fast as possible with the controller in your human hands, instead what some people like to do is program the perfect button sequence to make like the ultimate speedrun, but it might not actually be like humanly possible. They call that a tool-assisted speedrun. So the communities that make those are actually really helpful to the more like real hands speedrunners, because they're able to like test the limits, right? And so what the people that do the tool-assisted speedruns did with this information is they went frame by frame in the video footage of this glitch happening to the original runner Dota Teabag who experienced it, and they tried to recreate exactly what he did frame by frame. And what they found was the glitch wasn't occurring for them. They were unable to reproduce it. However, something actually kind of interesting is Panin, the guy who put up the original $1,000 bounty, who's a bit of a wizard with Super Mario 64 himself, famously has a channel, video on his channel about how there's multiple parallel universes in Super Mario 64, which is fascinating, but not relevant. On his uncommentated Panin second channel, he posted footage of reproducing the glitch in an emulator, but it was under a sort of unnatural condition. So people had started talking about this cosmic ray concept, and you're going to elaborate on that, I'm sure, quite soon. But this will maybe help you with that. What he had done was he had, to quote him exactly, is he compared the upwarp, and by changing the first byte of Mario's height value from apparently C5 to C4, and he gives like the full like numerical descriptor of that. He says that it produces a really similar result. There could be the reason why it's not exactly the same could be because the footage from Dota Teabag's stream was a little bit choppy, may have had like Twitch lag, might have had lag from his N64 console or his capture system. So the small margin of error could suggest that what Panin was able to reproduce was actually maybe the same. And then, so what he talked about, he said, for the record, a change from C5 to C4 is a single bit change, where one bit changes from a 1 to a 0, right? So there's 8 bits in a byte, and if the first byte read, and apparently it's literally this, 11000101, the last one was changed to a 0. So he manually manipulated this byte, which represents Mario's height value, and then was able to reproduce the glitch. The problem is that's still not the solution, because in a natural, like you powered on the game, played up to that point, or like any kind of natural scenario where you're playing the game and you're in this level, that byte doesn't read 0. Like at that point, it'll always be the C5, the 11000101, whatever. It'll always be that value. So somehow this bit was a 0 instead of a 1. Possibly. That's a possible explanation of what the case could have been with Dota Teabag's situation. And so that actually, in a way, possibly validates the cosmic ray theory, which, do you want to talk about that, Adam?
Yeah, so I'm particularly surprised that, so maybe I'll put a video in the actual, the show showing what happened, but I'm surprised that one one value could cause such a large
and that they identified it
effect
too.
on the character, just like flipping. Yeah, that's amazing unto itself. But yeah, just like switching a 1 to a 0 caused that to happen, and like not just like a random
Right, yeah.
like error message or something.
There's a lot of
It's pretty
examples of tiny little
interesting.
things like that affecting games in big ways. As a side tangent, it's not a speedrunning thing, but there's a famous exploitable glitch. Not quite the same, not quite on such a tiny level, but for example, in Final Fantasy VII, the maximum amount of damage that the player sees is 9,999. But the game actually clocks damage a lot higher than that, so the damage counter can keep rolling. And there's this way to manipulate the entire game using the optional character Vincent. I think it has to be Vincent, that you can get the. So what happens is it keeps on going up and up and up and up and up, and it can roll over, and it'll end up doing 0 damage instead of what's supposed to say. So people manipulate this to defeat optional bosses such as Emerald Weapon in one hit. It's just, it'll say 99999 or whatever, but it'll actually do like a million or whatever it's supposed to be. It's just all hidden. But the difference between getting this strat correct and having it roll back over and go to 0 is like you have to be very precise with it. So there's a lot. Same thing with manipulating Pokemon Red to give you a Mew without using a cheat device. You have to like manually insert a value by battling a certain Pokemon after you've like activated this like other glitch that then turns the game into like this like weird state that you can reverse. But in that time, you can kind of inject a number. A lot of games kind of do weird things where just tiny little changes can really like cascade into an effect that you want. Although in this case, it's like such a tiny change. Like that's so small.
Huh.
But so there's actually a pretty profound difference here, though, that I think is worth mentioning. So these two phenomenon are alike because like one tiny infinitesimal like change can have a dramatic effect on like the outcome of the program that's running. But I think the difference here is that, as funny as this sounds, if you consider like the developer's intended behavior, yeah, that's not supposed to happen. But if you consider like the exact behavior of the code of the game as it's written and has been compiled, like that's a reproducible behavior, right?
Yes. 100%. Yes. It's like these are known strategies.
Like you can find that error that allows that to happen like in the code of the game, right? Whereas whatever happened to Dota underscore teabag that day, they have not been able to find an explanation.
It's a mystery.
It's actually not the only time it's happened too. I'll really quickly throw out that this actually happened at a live speedrunning setting once, where there's a live event, which is Games Done Quick, that happens usually at like a convention hall and is a big charity marathon, typically for Prevent Cancer Foundation or Doctors Without Borders. And in 2017, there was a race of the Nintendo Entertainment System game Blaster Master. And for one of the two players, a boss just wasn't present. So normally you would enter the room, there's a boss encounter of some sort, and then upon winning, there's like an item that's dropped. I'm not that familiar with the game, so I don't know the specifics of which boss, which item, whatever. But for one player, the boss wasn't present, the item was there. And so, of course, the community immediately jumped on that because that could be a huge time save if it's reproducible. They were able to find a memory range that if they went in and specifically manipulated it outside of the game and then ran the game, they could produce the result, but they could not achieve the same alteration to that memory value through gameplay. Same thing, they frame by frame recreated the run, did not achieve the same result. They speculated in that case that it could be a hardware issue. The NES consoles that Games Done Quick uses, they're very old, as all NES consoles are, but those ones are very old and heavily used. Also, the cart was a Japanese cart being played in a American NES console using a cart converter. So some people suspect maybe the contacts between the cart converter, or the NES maybe weren't making contact. And I kind of wonder about that, right? Because if a lot of the data that's transferred, for example, between like a cart and a console, if at the level of like bits within a byte, if like an on or an off bit is like an electrical pulse, then maybe if that contact isn't making contact the entire time, and in some physical way, even just somebody walking through the room, enough of a rumble on the ground for that to lose contact, like for the tiniest moment, could a pulse be missed? Could a bit be flipped that way? Because that
That's a
could
good
also
question. I'm not
just as
actually
easily be
sure.
a cosmic ray situation, right? So I think it's time maybe if you kind of know about that, because I actually have to admit, I really don't know exactly what that means. But it is sort of one of the theories.
Is it the sun attacking us?
Yeah,
The sun's pulling a ranged
Basically,
attack. It's a ranged DPS class, and we're just here catching damage.
it's definitely a ranged attack, and it's pretty relentless. It's like one of those bullet hell games, but
Yeah,
you
we just
can't
keep
really
on moving
avoid
in
anything.
an orbit straight into all of the bullets.
Yeah. Actually, I had one quick question for Andrew before we talk about the going theory.
Maybe.
You're a computer guy.
That's true. You
Yes.
study computer science, right?
Yes.
That's the question.
That wasn't the question, though.
I thought it was a
I have more. As far as like hunting down this glitch, how does that? So, do you do coding? You like code, and you have to chase bugs and stuff in the things that you work on. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
How does that the approach that Ben described? Does that sound similar to the kind of stuff that you do on a day-to-day?
I think that's pretty much identical to how you would find like a software bug in any any program, really. The thing that's interesting to me about it is you've got I think is it an emulator in this case, or was it actually on an N64?
The bug originally happened on a real N64 console. An emulator is often used to try to find things like that because, unlike your situation, these people don't necessarily have access to the original source code, right? Because these are commercial products for which they're not the developers, right? So in a lot of cases, they have an extra layer of challenge, which is that they're to some degree reverse engineering the hardware involved and the software involved in order to try to find what causes these issues. But I still think that the process is quite similar. It's just you may have the whole source code to look at. Well, you run the program and figure out what line it interrupts or fails at or whatever. Whereas these guys are analyzing some kind of debug thing that they were able to make by reverse engineering as much as they could in the first place. So it's kind of there's the potential for inaccuracies even in just their tools that the speedrunners have, I should say. But
for sure.
Yeah. So
no, that was pretty much where it was leading. It was like I think what makes programming or debugging really hard in like a Windows environment is how many different configurations of hardware you can have within like a computer. And so often, you're doing what Ben was describing. Like you want to figure out each step that you'd have to take to make this sequence of events happen to make the bug occur. But the nice thing about, I guess, console system is going to be that it's all standardized. It's all built to a certain specification. You're probably less likely to run into like configuration issues. Whereas like Windows, literally like in different regions of the world, you're going to have like different date formats in your computer, and that can cause issues with like databases and just like how you like input strings and stuff. So it gets kind of interesting as you start making hardware more, what do you want to call it, configurable. You get more scenarios where you can't control every single variable of what's going into the code.
Right.
But I think,
Is that why Apple computers are so like optimized often and like
I think so.
Don't have a lot of issues?
There's a few different
interesting.
reasons. One other reason as well that's worth mentioning with Apple computers is because there are generally a smaller like install base of those worldwide versus Windows PCs, is there's less people like attacking them and specifically looking for vulnerabilities. Because if you are, for example, in like, let's say in like hacking culture, there's like three terminologies, right? There's white hat, which is if you're hacking for the purpose of like, maybe you're employed by a company and you're there to be their like penetration tester. You're there to specifically determine like what are the faults. That's the terminology. What are the faults in our software? Like how could an attacker break into our software? And you're there to kind of try to do it first and protect the company. Like you're legal hacking, right? You're doing this like contracted to do this by like some kind of software developer and trying to like look for problems. Gray hat is like maybe you follow your own sort of ethical, moral compass, but not everything you do is legal. Black hat is like you're hacking to like steal credit cards, or you're hacking to like spread a virus around and create a botnet, right? So let's say you're a black hat hacker, like you're trying to make a botnet, you're trying to infect a large amount of PCs all at once in order to like tell them all to like connect to a server so that server can't handle the load and gets shut down, or whatever you might do. Like you're just not going to build your whatever your attack vector is, whatever your botnet is. You're not really going to aim for like Macs or even like PCs running Linux, because just the install base is like so much smaller. I mean, you might look for Linux vulnerabilities because a lot of servers are on Linux, but that's kind of a side note. But yes, for the most part, like
Right.
that is one reason why Macs are really stable, and also by design, having like a narrow range of hardware options means that they support less variability, and
Right.
you can have a much more consistent sort of like a much more like kind of connected like software and hardware layer where like they're working together with like I guess like a more
Mhm.
optimized design kind of between the two of them.
Right. So then to sort of bring it back to Andrew's point of if it's being done on the actual video game console, there's fewer things to check, I guess, to try to figure out what's going on. There's fewer like compatibility issues that could have spawned the error.
In the era
It's more
of Super Mario 64, version differences between consoles, as well as version differences between like versions of the game, are more invisible to the consumer than they are today. So today you buy a game, you get patches that are downloaded over the internet, things like that. There are examples of cartridge-based games from the 90s and early 2000s and stuff like that where they printed one version of the game up till a certain point, discovered some issue or error or something, and actually started printing a revised version, and there's like not an easy way to tell which one you have, right? Or there have been changes to the console that are done sometimes for the purpose of making the manufacturing process cheaper and therefore increasing like the revenue per unit sold or whatever. They always look for like ways that they could cut costs and stuff like that as consoles age. For example, the PlayStation 5, which is like brand new, already has a revision. There's a revised version of the PS5 that has a different heat sink, which is part of its cooling mechanism, right?
Yep.
Box to box, there actually is a serial number difference, so you can identify which one you're buying. But like it is not a PS4 or a PS5 Slim, or like it's not a new model. Effectively, it's not even really like a new SKU. It's just a small manufacturing process change. So sometimes a glitch might be dependent on having the right cart version, having the right console version, or something like that. But and actually, for example, Pan and Koic 2012, who put up the $1,000 bounty, mentioned specifically that it is on the 1.0 Japanese version of Super Mario 64 that the speedrunner encountered this glitch, and recommends using that version if you're hunting for it. But there's no sign of whether or not it has. There can be other versions, or maybe whatever it was could be reproducible on a different version. I'm sure the Super Mario 64 community has tried all kinds of possibilities. Anything to save some time.
$1,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, imagine being so enthusiastic about making sure that Super Mario 64 gets beat faster that you're willing to put $1,000 on the line. Like, these people are very passionate about it, right?
I'm imagining how much work would go into tracking down this bug. Like, Andrew, ballpark, how many hours would you spend tracking down like a single error, and then how much money do you make a year? Just kidding. Just kidding.
To the first part, I think if I can kind of estimate, if I can estimate what I imagine happens in a video game development scenario, if you're telling me across many odd years that Mario 64 has been out, if not longer, probably like 25 years, you're going back to what I was alluding to earlier, I think the main thing when you're trying to debug a computer problem is you're trying to determine what the inputs are. So you want those to be as defined as possible. And then for your environment, you want to understand that as well as you can. So if you end up in a scenario like this where like it's a 1 in a million chance of happening, if I'm a game developer, I'd probably just chalk that up and that we just don't spend the resources to look into it. But I think in general, yeah, you'd kind of treat it that way, right? Like bugs that can happen consistently and always occur, if you understand it, it's easy to fix. But once you get into this realm of like not understanding how to make something happen, then it's kind of, is it worth the time and effort to put into it, or do we just ship it out? I mean, in these days,
I have to imagine Nintendo probably didn't even know. I have to imagine Nintendo has never seen this.
You don't think R&D 3 is testing for cosmic rays?
I don't necessarily know how much Nintendo looks at like what players are doing of their like oldest titles these days, but maybe Nintendo knows about it now because these guys found it and it's been a bit of a news item. But I have to imagine that during the development they never saw anything like it.
No, probably not.
If it's this rare and can't be reproduced, it could very well be that when Dota_Teabag had it happen to him, it could be literally, it wouldn't surprise me if it was the first time that a console with Super Mario 64 in it ever produced that result. It wouldn't even surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Colin was about to say something.
Well, Ben, when you said Nintendo doesn't really think about, like, they wouldn't have even looked for this kind of stuff in old games, just makes me think of the Paper Mario skip where you take Paper Mario out of the N64, put Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time into the N64, do something in Ocarina of Time, take Ocarina of Time out, put Paper Mario back in, and that activates the skip in Paper Mario. Like,
yep.
That
one actually, that's actually worth
figure that out. Like, what?
So that's actually worth talking about. But I don't know if now's the moment. Maybe now's the moment because you mentioned it.
I opened a Pandora's box of speedrunning nonsense.
It's actually a really interesting category of glitch that like could be relevant, not necessarily to what happened in Super Mario 64, but it kind of involves what they call like the be all and end all of like a category of glitch in a video game, and that's arbitrary code execution. And for short they call it an ACE, arbitrary code execution. And what that is if you can get the pointer essentially of like the of like whatever I don't know if you would call it a runtime or whatever, if you can get like I guess the processor of the console's like pointer to point somewhere where you were able to manipulate what's in the console's RAM or memory, like memory, not like data storage, but like where your save is, but memory that is like just being used to make calculations or to remember the game state or whatever. If you can get the console's like processor pointer to be looking at a spot in memory that you can manipulate, you could potentially put something there that the processor can't distinguish from code, right? And if you can find a glitch that causes it to be looking somewhere where it shouldn't, and you can modify that, you can make the game do anything you want. An interesting example is, to keep it in the Mario family, Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo had an arbitrary code execution found in the first level, or one of the two first levels that are available when you first start a save, where players were able to essentially write in the memory by placing items around the level in a specific way, because they were able to, just like what we were talking about with reverse engineering 64, they were able to determine like what does the memory look like at any given moment, because they have debug tools where they can play the game and read the contents of the memory at the same time, and how can we move things around to get exactly what we want in the memory and create a set of steps. And it literally comes down to just, like all the different shells and the items and stuff that exist in the level, just placing them in very specific ways, and then using a glitch that causes the process to look in the wrong place. They were able to tell the game, like, roll the credits, and then put that in memory, basically execute the glitch. The processor moves from actual game instructions to the memory in error and sees code there that says, roll the credits roll. Well, I don't know, the credits are rolling. That fits a definition of beating the game. And there you had an arbitrary code execution that made the game clearable in like a minute.
Yeah, that
right?
runs super short. Yeah.
And then people were like, well, we can do wild stuff with this. And to take it to its like furthest extent, I mean, maybe they've done more since then, but I remember a runner called Seth Bling, as well as a large crew of other people that helped him on the project. I didn't intend to talk about this, so I don't have the list of names, but Seth Bling is the person who uploaded the video and actually did it with human hands on a regular controller plugged into the console port, unmodified, was literally able to use this arbitrary code execution to turn Super Mario 64 into a game that plays essentially like Flappy Bird. Like, on a running console from like a clean boot up state, which is really cool that people do that. And so the thing that Colin was mentioning with Paper Mario is Paper Mario does not have an arbitrary code execution glitch that has been found yet. It's possible that something like that could exist, but it hasn't been found yet. However, recently, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time did have one discovered, and what they found out with Paper Mario is Paper Mario was not properly reinitializing the console memory. So you could play Paper Mario up to a point, save your game, because it has to start and end with Paper Mario if it's a Paper Mario speedrun, right? So play Paper Mario up until the relevant moment, save the game, turn off the console, put in Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, perform Ocarina of Time's arbitrary code execution glitch to set up a RAM state, a memory state that you want, and then if you quickly enough turn the console back off and put in Paper Mario, it doesn't reinitialize the memory, and then when you're back in Paper Mario, you have the state you need in order for some glitch to occur that lets you skip a huge portion of the game. These people are doing some really incredible things.
Yeah, it's
just
super
to get a lower time. It's really
like
cool.
if you just watch these speedruns, and these are usually like the special ones that they do, or they're like kind of like the showcase ones. And the funnest thing about watching these kinds of things is it's just because you get used to
pushing
seeing
the limits.
Yeah, exactly. You get used to seeing the any percent, so you get used to seeing this and that, and then to see somebody attempt to perform or explain, or they do it or whatever, and they show you these like one-off, like you would never do it in a real run because it's way too risky, but when it works, it's kind of like that 1 in a million chance that we're sort of talking about. But obviously, you can replicate it. But in this case, when you actually see somebody do that, you just go like, how did somebody find this? Like they always, they usually make it clear that like this is not a for sure thing. So doing it live in a race almost never makes sense. But to get it to go and then having that be a run, it's a very neat realm of speedrunning that I find infinitely fascinating. But I can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
I've already kind of prompted you in this direction a few times, Adam, but I think it's actually time. How does a bit flow?
I'm ready. Yeah, so just to refresh the minds, basically all the things we just talked about, tricking the computer chip or whatever to do what you want it to do, etc., not working to get this Mario glitch thing to happen. There's basically no series of inputs that people could do to make this error happen. The only thing that seems to work is like manually going in and turning a 1 to a 0 in like the rawest layer of code.
Access to do that
so
essentially with hands on the controller.
Right. So there is a way that can happen, and I guess this is the going theory. Cosmic ray. So cosmic ray, basically when an atom gets really hot and bothered and whatever, it can ionize. It kicks off some of its electrons or whatever. Becomes this charged little particle, subatomic particle, and when one of these little ionized guys interacts with other atoms or whatever, it can, they sort of collide and things can go nuts. So this is kind of like what happens in the Large Hadron Collider, like these particle acceleration experiments. You have, two particles or something like that coming together, hitting each other, and then all hell breaks loose and things, go nuts on a very small scale. So the sun makes a whole bunch of these, particles, and it's blasting them off in all directions at all times. That would be a horrible thing for us because these really high energy particles can interact with parts of your body, like your cells and DNA and things like that, and really like screw up your internal genetic code and whatever. You can. This is one way that you can get cancers and things like that. Basically, parts of your cell, parts of your DNA or whatever can get smashed by these really hot and energetic particles. But it's not like the sun is firing one bullet and it just coincidentally hits the right spot. It's firing billions and billions of these things. You're just getting pounded by these things at all times, except that you're actually, as a human, you're full of lots of space. So what an atom actually looks like, sometimes you see like these sort of like atomic cloud diagrams. There's like a really small hard core and then sort of a cloud around it. Most of that is empty space. So when these cosmic rays go towards another atom or something like that, if it's just one, very small chance of actually making contact, probably will just go right through you. But like I said, the sun's kicking off tons of those at any moment. So if you're in space next to the sun, you're getting bombarded by these things. And it's just, it's bad probability. You're probably going to get, all shot up with these cosmic rays that are, really going to screw up your human code. Luckily, we have a protective layer on Earth, the magnetosphere. Basically, the magnetic field that surrounds Earth actually blocks a lot of that.
That's good to know.
And that's because these cosmic rays are, these charged subatomic particles. So magnetic fields and charged particles can interact, so they can kind of deflect and do all sorts of.
So I want to quickly ask: are they all produced by suns, or do other like celestial bodies of any kind produce them?
So that's a good question, because the sun produces a ton, and we get hit by. I mean, a lot of that gets buffed away by our magnetosphere. Because they're relatively low energy compared to some of these cosmic rays that you can encounter. There are more exotic cosmic rays that can come from outside the galaxy, far reaches of the universe. Basically, when like the most catastrophic things in the universe happen, like star collapses or supernovas or something like that, these extremely high energy particles can get kicked out. So those are a lot more hard to come by, but we do still get a ton of them coming into our galaxy and whatnot all the time. Just way fewer than particles from the sun. But the fact that they have such a high energy, it actually is able to penetrate the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around Earth, easier than the sun's would. So where the sun is kind of doing the shotgun, all these particles sort of getting blasted around the Earth, these really high energy ones can actually just kind of just shoot right through. And so those can be very damaging to, whatever particle they hit, if they actually do hit. But it's very rare for them to hit anything because you're basically all space. The nucleus is so small. So, that's why like spacewalking astronaut type people have to have these like protective suits that protect them from radiation and all this sort of stuff.
Okay.
So even though it's pretty rare for these high energy particles to come and get through the magnetic field of Earth, they do happen. And you can measure them. They happen frequently enough that you can get some measurements. So actually in undergrad, I did this experiment just as a lab for a lab course. where we just set up a sort of a Geiger counter type thing in front of an old World War II, I think, watch with a glow-in-the-dark face. So this paint was made with basically the formulation of the paint had a radioactive compound in it. So you could stick a Geiger counter in front of it, and you could actually pick up the radiation coming off of this watch. So we wanted to get a lot of data on, how radioactive it was, etc. So we left it overnight and came back the next day, and we saw basically like really consistent levels of radiation coming off the thing, and then very occasional, like enormous spikes, super high energy events.
Right.
So it's like, what the heck is that? That's one of these cosmic rays.
Oh, so it wasn't the watch that emitted it. The Geiger counter had picked up the cosmic rays.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So we do get these really high energy rays coming in, hitting things, but it's rare. So, but when they do come in and make contact with things, it can be catastrophic depending on what it hits. Like I mentioned, for humans, if these cosmic rays come in and screw around with your DNA, it can, blast off little chunks of your DNA, and then if you have to, if you want to reproduce in your cells or whatever, you have incorrect code. So
you'd be speedrunning life at that point.
Yeah, can you skip? Can I try to skip?
Oh yeah.
I want a time save. I just want to become 80 tomorrow. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Roll credits.
You know what? If it does cause like massive growth, like cancer growth, I mean, it does.
Sorry. I'm sorry. It's maybe a little bit.
Life any % run.
That's a little grim. Any percent.
When you
I mean, that
connect
is
it
a
to
speed
speedrunning, yeah, it gets a little grim. I don't think anybody really wants to speedrun life.
No.
Maybe.
But yeah, if it can happen to your cells and the stuff that's inside your cells, there's no reason to believe that these things wouldn't interact with electronics as well.
I want to get really technical.
And so,
sorry, go ahead. I wanted
go
to
ahead.
know.
No,
so
go for it.
Can I read to you a pretty shorthand but fair description of like how RAM memory like works, and maybe you would be able to see if you can come up with like an answer of how a cosmic ray would actually interact with this? Is that something we could? So
yeah,
this
for
is,
sure.
And this is probably pretty abridged because I'm not reading this out of a scientific paper. So I'm reading it off literally howstuffworks.com. But they say that a memory chip is like an integrated circuit made of millions of transistors and capacitors. In the most common form of computer memory, dynamic random access memory, or DRAM, which is, I believe, what game consoles are running as well. A transistor and a capacitor are paired. They create a memory cell, and it represents a single bit of data. The capacitor holds the information as a 1 or a 0. The transistor acts as a switch that lets the control circuitry on the memory chip read the capacitor or change its state. The capacitor is like a small bucket that is able to store electrons. To store memory cell, the bucket is filled with electrons, and to store a 0, it is emptied. The problem is the capacitor's bucket is that it has a leak. In a matter of a few milliseconds, a full bucket would become empty, and therefore for dynamic memory to work, either the CPU or the memory controller has to come along and recharge the capacitors that are holding a 1 before they discharge. To do that, it reads the memory and writes it right back, and the refresh operation happens automatically thousands of times per second. So, whatever. Is it possible then, do you think, like a cosmic ray could, influence or mess with the state of one of these so-called what did they call it, a memory cell, essentially, right? It's transistors and capacitors. Could it mess with I guess like the contents of a capacitor?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what would happen. So I'm not sure which direction you said that it went, either from a 1 to a 0 or a 0 to a 1.
Strictly no. It could be that if this was a cosmic ray event, it could actually be that maybe even a different value changed, and it just so happens that the one that Pannon found also produces a similar result. Like, there's a lot of different possibilities here, right? But in the case
Yeah.
where Pannon found a bit that can be flipped and achieve the result that happened in Dota Teabag's game, Pannon was changing a 1 to a 0. So he was essentially
Okay.
emptying
So-
a memory cell.
Yeah, so I can sort of picture this cosmic ray event happening in kind of two ways, and it, in my mind, would kind of work either way, whether it goes from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. So for the bucket to be full, that means that there's some charge in there, and usually that's like electrons moving in or out of something. So these cosmic rays are ionized, so they have a charge unto themselves. So they're not neutral or anything like that. They have some charge. So, and that's what lets them interact with so many things so violently. So if the bucket is full and there's some electrons in there, it's possible that this cosmic ray that's also charged shows up in this area, and there could be some sort of repulsion where it kicks electrons out of the bucket as it flies through. I could also imagine that, so the bucket is obviously not an actual bucket, but it's got to be made out of some sort of
Apparently,
atoms.
oh yeah, pairs of transistors and capacitors, apparently.
Yeah, so this cosmic ray could also be, it could penetrate the device, show up into the area of the bucket, interact with an atom that is inside the bucket
Like
somewhere.
Part of the surface
knock
of
off.
the inner surface of the physical.
Yeah,
Maybe
if it's
capacitor?
silicon or
Okay.
metal or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so whatever the material is, it could potentially come and bash into one of the atoms that make up the actual device, kicking off some of the charge from like a neutral piece, which would leave it ionized. So then that would be a way to fill the bucket.
Okay, so it can work either way then.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
and I'm also thinking that I would think that this third option would be more of like it would probably permanently damage something, but if it like screwed up the actual pathway for which the charges could
That
pass
sounds
through, like if
would be
it
pretty
disconnected
permanent,
something. Yeah. But yeah, there's a bunch of ways for basically this little tiny charge particle to come in and either put some charge in or take some charge out through violently kicking the bucket.
Could it also interrupt the process? Because remember that the description here it indicated that the CPU or the memory controller refreshes all of the capacitors that it knows are a 1 or can tell are a 1 or whatever before they discharge naturally. Could it be possible that in some way this could interfere or mess with that process while it's supposed to be happening, and therefore a bit that's supposed to be refreshed by the memory controller doesn't get refreshed on a certain pass of that procedure? Do you think it can interrupt
Yeah,
like an
I
active
can't.
process like that? It's kind of an interesting thought.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that one a bit more, but I would imagine it would be something along the lines of like, it almost kind of sounds like that Paper Mario type thing where you like trick the thing that's checking in on the device to basically tell it that it's seeing something that it's not.
Right.
And then
Right.
it might continue doing its processes with like a incorrect assumption. So that could come from just like
Maybe.
knocking a bit of charge out, and then it looks and says, "Oh, I don't think there's any charge here, so I'm not going to
Refresh it.
refresh it."
Okay,
Or
that one sounds like
or
a maybe,
all of a
where the
sudden-
other two sound like they're definitely possible. Were you
yeah,
gonna say all of a sudden?
yeah, I was just going to reiterate that like that could have some like the screwing up the path where charges can flow could also probably do that kind of effect. But yeah, so this is one of those theories where like there are a whole bunch of ways to make it make sense and have it be like physically plausible, but I can't imagine how you would go about validating one
It would
model
be really
over the
hard,
other,
yeah.
etc.
I imagine that it might be possible to prove that it can happen. I think it
Mhm.
would probably be pretty impossible to prove that it is what did happen. Right? Like you could probably build some kind of situation in some way that's going to be maybe more responsive or sensitive to. I don't know exactly how you would go about it. I did read in passing while I was doing a little bit of research for this, but I can't unfortunately cite the source because I didn't think it was important enough to note. But I did read somewhere that somebody was saying that the as like kind of Moore's law progresses and our hardware for electronics becomes like smaller and smaller, and their transistors and things like that are built smaller and smaller, that they could be more susceptible to this. I don't know why that would be. Does that seem to make sense to you?
It's just that they're a smaller target to hit. So like this thing's really small and there's less space, so it's easier to hit something?
I think it's easier to hit one thing, or no, multiple things with one ray. So like even though the chip is smaller, because all the bits are closer together.
What I'm thinking is maybe the memory cell that's made of transistors and capacitors. If this website is correct to say that the bucket is filled with electrons, plural, that the smaller the memory cell, the less you need in it for it to be read as a 1. Therefore, more easily.
Yeah, these are all very plausible things that could like add up to making this such an issue.
So
my initial thought is that as we shrink things more and more down, the density of there's less open space inside the box, basically. So you're getting more and more important little pieces all jammed into one spot. So if some ionization type thing happens in a small spot here, it could, screw up a little bit over here, but it can sort of like trickle down and it's a juicier target, I think. As things get smaller. Also, they're using less power, less electricity, so fewer charges flowing around.
Okay.
So having one cosmic ray come in and hit one of these cells, like back in the day when you had these like big transistors that are like the size of your car or something, one cosmic ray isn't going to really screw up things that are going on inside because it's using so much electricity and so many electrons are flowing around.
Actually, it's interesting you mentioned that because I did mention to you briefly before we started the episode because I wanted to grab the information, but there is an event that could have been related to this phenomenon that happened to an airplane. So from what I found in 2008, a Qantas airline that was going from Singapore to Australia, it suddenly pitched down into a nosedive, and then the pilots had to take over and pull it back up. 12 people were injured. As far as I read, nobody passed away or anything like that. And what they called it, their like technical term was it was a single event upset. They couldn't find any kind of like bug or programming error specifically in the system that could have caused it or whatever. And you know how airplanes have their log. I don't know, is it a black box or I don't know maybe that much about aviation, so, yeah. But I know that like airplane computers log everything that happens to them, right? And so they, were able, I'm assuming, to use that to reproduce all the steps in the airplane computer software and try to look for a bug. And apparently nothing was found. And again, so they called it a single event upset. It does sound like it actually could be a possible cosmic ray type of situation in that case.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it happened on a flight, and a flight particularly in that sort of area of the world. So like I was saying that, the magnetic field around Earth buffs away a lot of these cosmic rays.
Yeah.
And like the further up into the atmosphere you get, fewer and fewer particles and things for the cosmic ray to hit. So as soon as the cosmic ray hits an atom, it's probably not going to go any further. It's going to put all of its energy into that thing, and it's going to do some weird reaction.
Okay.
So this is actually a known problem for commercial airline pilots, is they spend so much time high up in the atmosphere that they take on way more cosmic ray radiation than somebody who lives further down in our atmosphere.
That's interesting.
And the way that the magnetic fields around Earth are set up, basically, it's kind of like a weak spot near the poles. So it's even worse at buffing away the cosmic radiation. So if you're really high up and near the poles, you're getting a lot more flux of radiation through you. So the probability just goes higher and higher and higher that it actually does hit something important.
So then now I want to know if like Dota_Teabag lives on like the North Pole or the South Pole. All the Super
they should be
Mario
doing these
64
experiments in
speedrunners
space.
are like trying to figure out how they can get near the poles.
They got to go into one of those like
Yeah.
U-2 airplanes and then play it from low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
Just really up the chances that they'll get hit by cosmic rays.
I mean,
Yeah.
airplanes these days have outlets, right? You can just set up your N64 right on the little table that's on the seat in front of you, right? And
Yeah.
Oh,
you can
yeah.
just,
Yeah.
local record with a laptop. You don't have to be live streaming to submit a run. If you can make it happen by, being in a plane, then maybe that's the new thing. Maybe Super Mario speedrunners are gonna spend a lot of money on plane tickets to try to get a good time.
Then they're gonna have like the different categories will be any percent, 40,000
No
feet,
airplane.
any percent, 50,000 feet. Like it'll all be like how high up they
Yeah.
are.
It's scaled based on your height.
That would be amazing. Actually, so it's funny that you mentioned that though, because one of the things that most speedrunning categories so the thing is, like, speedrunning is a phenomenon that is not usually intended by the developer, right? Some developers have, as speedrunning has become a more popular phenomenon, some developers have become more speedrun friendly and have implemented access to like speedrun leaderboards, or have implemented like in-game timers, speedrun mode that skips all like cutscenes and stuff automatically. They've also been known to leave glitches that are extremely unlikely to be found in normal gameplay, because speedrunners use them. Some developers have become friendly to it in that way. But for the most part, other than things like that, speedrunning is something that generally happens like outside of the intention of developers, and therefore like there aren't really any rules other than the rules that everybody who participates in this kind of agree upon, right? And so a lot of communities run votes when something new and unprecedented happens to say like, should this be allowed, should it not be allowed? And there was an interesting case that happened recently, where so what happened was a Japanese speedrunner of Dragon Quest III, he described a phenomenon that happened to him in his childhood, where he was playing Dragon Quest III, and his brother, I think, like kicked the console, maybe by accident or something. I'm not sure. And this is a Nintendo like NES game, right? And so I guess the console turned off, and he turned the console back on and found that his character was like level 99. It was like a level 99 sage or something like that. Was this specific like setup that was like far and above like not what his save file represented before. And there were some maybe issues with like the save data and some corruption in the game, but it was still mostly playable, and it was just a kind of a memory he had, and he talked about it for a while, and people tried to figure out how it could be done. Is it real? Is it not? Whatever. And at some point, some runners found that by doing things like tilting the card a certain way or trying to hit the console, whatever, while they're doing this, that they were able to like get strange phenomenon like that to happen, including I think at some point somebody reproduced getting a level 99 character, but it wasn't consistent. There was no like consistent way to perform the glitch yet, at least at that time. It's also worth mentioning that when Colin earlier described in Final Fantasy VII an overflow with damage values, this actually is a form of overflow. I don't know exactly what data it is. It's not necessarily data in your RAM, rather it's data in your save file, but it overflows. I'm sorry, this fan is blowing on my face. As it overflows,
you look majestic.
I keep having to, it's blowing my hair on my face. As it overflows, it actually overflows like where the data is stored. So not necessarily in like DRAM or that kind of memory that we talked about earlier, but instead memory that is intended for more permanent storage. So probably something magnetized. But at any rate, it overflows and produces like a character that is level 99. And for some reason that I don't think I completely understand, it's like a level 99 sage. There's different character classes, right? And it produces a level 99 sage as the main character, or maybe no, as an additional character. I've never actually played Dragon Quest 3.
So if I recall correctly, the sage class is like, that game has jobs where you create your characters at a tavern at the very start, and you can do thief, merchant, priest, fighter, warrior, all of that. kind of stuff, and it's just that's what the class is going to be for the whole game. It's almost like a D&D kind of setup. You pick their stats and all that stuff, you name them. However, all characters are able to, with great effort, change their job to a sage at a certain point. You can there's like a set of conditions that you have to get, but their level will be
special job.
Yes, their level will be reset, but it's the only job that I think you can reclass people into other jobs as well, but the sage specifically is kind of like the ultimate class, and people do usually I think it's kind of not uncommon to reclass the hero as a sage.
Okay.
They have powerful offensive magic, they have powerful healing magic, and I think they have overall pretty good stats, so it's usually like a team of all sages, I think, is
you want that. If I'm not mistaken, I think this glitch only does it to one character. Don't know if it does it to your main character, or if it does it to somebody a different slot.
I was going to say, I don't specifically recall if you can do it to every character. It might just be the main character, but I know that the sage is kind of that was supposed to be not an ultimate job, but it's you can't just pick that one. You have to work very hard for it. So the fact that it flips to it is kind of, that makes sense.
Somehow the overflow lands on your character becoming a level 99 sage. And so this is the interesting thing is it was reproduced eventually, and a way to do it every single time was found that doesn't involve hitting your console or whatever. It's kind of wild, I'm not going to lie. What they found is by putting the NES console on a hot plate and setting the temperature to a very specific value, they were able to cause this corruption. So what actually happens, that the original runner who told the story kind of had forgotten about, or he wasn't aware of maybe, or because it happened in his childhood, and he's an adult even when he was sharing this story in his speedrunning community. And he's actually a runner of the game as well and has done the hot play method. So it's kind of cool that it came full circle, because sometimes glitches in speedrunning come actually from outside the speedrunning community. Somebody who's playing casually just notices a glitch, shares it online, and the speedrunning community jumps on it. Sometimes people who are aware of speedrunning but aren't speedrunners will post in speedrun communities and say, look what I found, and that can be really cool too. And they're really welcoming about that, by the way. So if you're ever playing a video game and something weird happens, don't be afraid to share it with the internet. Anyway, they found out that specifically it's a corruption that happens to the console while it's saving the data. So the console was probably kicked while he was saving his game. So you start a Dragon Quest save, you play up to a certain point, and then when you're saving the game, you make sure the hot plate is set to the right temperature. You save the game, and when you restart it, you have a level 99 sage, and a whole lot of the game is basically super easy. And so the interesting thing is, and the reason why I brought all this up is because this is kind of falls under console modification, right? And so what had to happen for Dragon Quest was are we going to risk all our hardware? Are we going to make it so that in order to speedrun this game, you have to have your console on a heat source that's set to a specific temperature? Is that going to be just the new method of playing the game? And what happened was, no. All of the people that are interested in running Dragon Quest 3 got together and talked about it and decided that hot plate would be kind of a separate category, right? So if you go to speedrun.com and go to the Dragon Quest 3 page, and I actually am just saying this because I'm assuming this is the case, but I don't actually know. I'm going to kind of pull it up while we're talking about it. But if you go to the Dragon Quest 3 page on speedrun.com, I'm sure that it's a separate leaderboard with separate times on it. So that way, if people want to continue playing the game in a more traditional method, you don't have to a hot plate and do that. So I'm actually not seeing it on speedrun.com, but I think maybe part of the issue with this, because if you do go to speedrun.com and look at Dragon Quest 3, the vast majority, almost exclusively, people who run this game are Japanese. There are very few American, European runners and stuff like that. So it's possible that they actually are hosting their leaderboards somewhere else, a Japanese website or something like that. I'm not totally certain. But at any rate, from what I understand, the hot plate was it became its own thing, and the prior methods were sort of kept as the main route to speedrun the game. And this has happened before too. There's other types of hardware modifications, or sometimes when I mentioned those arbitrary code execution glitches, to players who are really enthusiastic about playing Super Mario World really well, telling the game to warp to the credits doesn't reward the skill that they feel that they've trained, right? So what ends up happening is arbitrary code execution is a category and no arbitrary code execution is a category. So the reason why I bring up like hardware modification typically being disallowed or made into a separate category if it happens, it becomes popular, is because we were talking about the possibility of Super Mario 64 players taking commercial flights in order to run the game. So it's incredibly unlikely that that would become the norm, because if that was a thing that somebody did to reproduce the glitch, I'm sure it would not land on the regular leaderboard for the relevant category. I'm sure it would become some kind of alternate category or something, because people are not going to want to spend thousands of dollars on plane tickets to run their game. It's how it is, right?
Just before we move on, can I talk about a thing that happened to me when I was a child playing Dragon Quest III?
Yes.
Because it was a glitch, and I had no idea, because I think I was like very early using the internet, or didn't really know what to do with this information. So I had the re-release for North America on the Game Boy Color. It is one of my favorite Game Boy Color games. It's great, and I was playing it, and it had this mini game that was added that wasn't in the original game, but it may have been in the Super Nintendo Japanese version of the game that we didn't get. But they added this like mini game. It's like a Parcheesi track that you play, and it's kind of like this board game, and you roll the dice, and you can get into encounters and stuff like that. So you can level up in these encounters, and you can collect treasure in these encounters. The goal is always to get to the end of the track, and then you get that track's specialty, and they're scattered throughout the world. But anyways, the point was, I was just playing the game normally. I was terrible at it. It was my first Dragon Quest. I didn't know much about it. And I was playing the Parcheesi game, and I killed the slime, because you only get to use one character when you do this. So it was like, Hero, or Colin, or whatever I called him, killed slime. You gained whatever experience, and I happened to level up in the experience gain for whatever reason, right? So it was like, you grew to level 6, because at the start of the game. And then it was just like, you grew to level 7. You grew to level 8. And it kept on feeding me these messages. I maxed out my character. He went to level 99 in one sitting, but I had to press the A button for like half an hour, because in that game, every time you do it, it like shows you your stat upgrades, and you have to like. It took a long time, and I'm positive that, because I remember seeing somewhere, I don't know if it comes into like speedruns or anything like that. It seemed to be quite slow, to be honest, but speedrunning RPGs usually is kind of slow, so maybe it is fast to do it this way. But there is like a known Game Boy Color Parcheesi track glitch that can like max out a character. I triggered it by complete accident. It did happen to me in the wild. I had no idea, but I was freaking out. I was sitting there. I was like maybe like 11 or 12, just like looking at my Game Boy being like, what's happening? Oh my god! And then just like letting it go up and up. The only reason I ever got very far in that game ever is because I had a team of like guys that were being basically, just carried by the hero, who happened to be a level 99 character through the whole game.
I would guess the experience point reward maybe overflowed or something.
Yeah.
Overflowed.
I have no idea. I've always wanted to try to recreate it for fun.
Should we quickly define what an overflow or an underflow is in programming? Because we talked about it a couple of times, but didn't really. Is that helpful?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Andrew, do you run into this at all with programming, or?
I'm going to assume an underflow. I don't specifically know what an underflow is, but
it's when it flips the opposite way.
Yeah, it's the same thing in either direction, right? It's the limits of an integer, right?
Yeah. It's like, I think Final Fantasy does a lot of things between 0 and 255, and if 0 flips back around, it ends up being 255, and if 255 flips around, it ends up being 0. So there's a lot of like, I don't know that that's true specifically for those values, but like that's like an example. Yeah.
Yep.
I know that Final Fantasy uses like just literally for their stats, 255 is usually the highest stat you can have in something, like just like as your like D&D stats, if you will. Like 255 is kind of where it caps out, at least for Final Fantasy VIII, which is the one that I'm most familiar with for that system. So in that case, 0 would underflow right then to 255, and 255 would overflow to 0. And the aforementioned Final Fantasy VII glitch involving breaking the damage barrier but not actually seeing it happens when you toy with the upper limits of where that is, because you need a very specific amount to be able to kill the boss in one hit, but also not flip back over so that your attack says 9999 but actually does 0.
Right.
Which is a different problem.
So Andrew, like, is that something that people? I think you would probably build protections for that. If you're like really concerned about it for some integer value that your game stores, you would probably make the game check for that, right?
I think almost definitely.
Or the software even.
Yeah, because I think at a hardware level, like the 255 example, that's probably because whatever you're using to store like your strength attribute is a byte. So 8 bits typically make up a byte in most programming architectures. And with binary, well, I guess with binary being like zeros and ones, you end up in a scenario where a byte, the largest integer value you can get is 255 because it's what is it, 2 to the power of 7. You have like, if you think of your number as a series of bits, so it's like you stack like eight characters in a row. If you just have 1 1 1 1 whatever 8 ones in a row, that's 255, and then going to 256 would set everything to zero, and then
again.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yep.
So this overflow thing, I think, is actually the what the Y2K issue was. The way that they were defining dates.
Actually, it was. You're right. Yeah,
that's all I got.
It was. Yeah. No, you're correct.
Can I hop in? I just really looked up really quickly. This is going to derail it, but I just want to tie a bow on the Parcheesi thing because I looked it up real quickly when we were talking. And,
well, it's such like a grandmotherly thing to want to do. Tie a bow onto the Parcheesi.
Well, it's weird.
Did someone else find it?
It's called Parcheesi, but in this, but it is. So yeah, I'm just going to read it out from the Dragon Quest wiki. It only appears on the Game Boy Color version of the game. This glitch occurs while playing Parcheesi and landing on a space, which causes the character's stats to go down, and the stat you lose is strength. After this occurs, the next battle fought will result in a massive number of experience to be added to the character's total experience, causing him or her to automatically level up to level 99. However, it has been noted that these level ups are not the same as standard level ups, causing that level 99 character to only have the stats of approximately a level 75 character who is leveled up normally. This glitch only applies to the Game Boy Color version. So not only is it very specific, it might be an overflow glitch, and it's also weird because the stats don't line up as if you played the game normally.
It's like using rare candies in Pokemon.
That
kind of
happens. I know a lot about Pokemon racing for some weird reason. The reason why rare candy Pokemon are weaker than leveled up Pokemon
by design.
It's by design. There's 2 series of hidden values underneath every Pokemon. There's IVs and EVs. Effort values are gained from battles, and IVs are inherent in that Pokemon. They're random, like, once again, D&D stat roll, basically, within a range. And you can edit them, so every Pokemon will have strengths and weaknesses in terms of where their stat distributions will lie, and you can offset these a little bit with effort values. So Pokemon
you could almost say that IVs are like genetics, or even like nature versus nurture. EVs are like the experiences. I'm not going to say experience points, right? But they're like, what did this Pokemon encounter in combat situations? This is what you do.
Right. So if you like beat up a bunch of fast things, you'll probably get extra fast points.
Yes, 100%. That's exactly how it works. So if you have a Pokemon that already has, so even a Pokemon that's good at speed will have naturally higher speed stat as their base stat as a Pokemon archetype, but then on top of that individual Pokemon could have a really good speed IVs as well, and then if you train it EVs on top of that, this is how you reach like optimum values. So when you look at competitive Pokemon, they do calculations based on specific spreads and optimum min-maxing on everything. So there's like things, for example, where people will go for extreme stats, like the slowest possible Pokemon, so they can use a move called Trick Room, which reverses slow and fast to give them better turn order and priority. There's a lot of math. That community is intensely interesting. But yeah, since inception, weirdly enough, Pokemon had this 3-tiered system. The experience that you as a player can see, which really just controls the level ups, and the EVs and IVs, and then the base stats of each individual Pokemon type or species or whatever, that kind of decides how the stats actually get distributed upon level up. And the problem with rare candies is it offers no EVs at all. It literally just levels you up. So it just forces the stat gain. So if you've already maxed out your Pokemon's EV, which, hilariously, I'm pretty sure match out at 255, or
I think
250.
that's correct. Something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's in and around there. It might be 252. It's a value in and around there. If you've already maxed that out, you can use rare candies as much as you want. So what a lot of people do is they train against like you can train against like for example Pidgeys. I think they give like a +1 speed EV, and you could just do. You can only get a maximum of 100, I believe, EVs in any one category. So you can do a split where you just battle 100 Pidgeys, you've maxed out your speed IV, and now you can rare candy as much as you want, and you will get the stat gains you want at that point. You don't have to hit level 100 only training against speed things. You can kind of do all the work early and then do the quick level ups. You don't. But if you only do the quick level ups, you'll have a weaker Pokemon.
If I'm not mistaken,
This is
Colin,
getting really off topic. I'm sorry.
Correct me if I'm wrong. If you earn a certain number of EVs, use a rare candy, and you don't gain the stat from the EV on your next natural level up, those EVs are still present. And you do gain from them, right?
Oh, the
They were
EVs is just like
not-
it's just tracked for the whole thing. Yeah. It's
Yeah, but the actual like plus to the stat, the actual real stat isn't applied till you level up naturally, and the rare candy just doesn't apply them. The actual EV value that you earned but haven't applied to a stat by leveling yet remains present after you use the rare candy, and the next time you naturally level up, then they get applied. So it is like technically safe to use them in the middle as long as you have enough natural levels of headroom to still go max your EVs, correct?
Yes. Yeah, actually, and even better than that. So there's so people respec their Pokemon sometimes, and they will use items to remove all effort values from a Pokemon because there's a couple of items that do this, and you would go, well, why would you do that if you have a maxed out level 100 competitive Pokemon or whatever? Why would you do that? In certain games, there was a way where you just if you put them into the box and then take them out again, their stats it'll like the check it does. Checks their effort values and what their stats should be when you pull it out, and it like just reassigns them what it's supposed to be. There's a lot of weird nonsense in Pokemon games to make sure that you're like, I don't know, some of it's intentional and some of it's not. The older you get, the less intentional a lot of the problems are. But yeah,
That's cool. I never realized there's so much behind the scenes with that whole system. I always just assumed it was level.
Players really go out of their way when they're serious and passionate about something, and I think that's essentially the I guess I don't know, the message of I think what Colin and I have sort of like brought to the discussion is to really highlight that like when these people are passionate about what they want to find or do in a game, like they'll go so far out of their way to figure out the answer. And I know you want to finish your thought, Colin. I do want to say that. Oh, okay.
I just feel bad that I just went on a Pokemon rant when it was totally off topic.
Okay. It's all
The
right.
attack continues.
I do kind of want to say though that like it does sort of loop back around, because if you think about it, let's say the answer to the Super Mario 64 upward jump thing warp is the up warp. Let's say the answer to it is it really was a cosmic ray. That's actually like the worst possible news, right? For a couple of reasons. One is obviously they don't have a usable glitch that they can use to skip more time. A huge part of it is because of the bounty, and I'm not saying that the bounty is that by any means a bad thing. I think it's an awesome thing for that to be made available by Pandacoic 2012. So like shout out to him for doing that. But a lot of people put a lot of time collectively into trying to figure this out. And if nothing is ever found because it really was like a cosmic ray, it's kind of unfortunate how a lot of that time could have been spent in pursuit of a dead end, right? Like that's actually it's fascinating scientifically, and I think that's maybe why it caught your attention, Adam. And I think a lot of people are really like kind of enthusiastic with that part of the story. So maybe it is kind of worth it, at least because we get to kind of talk about this and it's sort of interesting. But from the perspective of the speedrunners, it has to be very disappointing if that's what it turns out to be, right? Because a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of passion, and it was some random trait of the universe, right? Like,
well, that's the tragedy of science, especially for experimentalists. That literally does happen in the lab sometimes. I've had projects where I've observed something that I think it's not cosmic ray based, but I observed something I thought was really cool, and I tried to reproduce it so I could try to figure out what is going on. and I just can't. I spend months trying to make the thing happen again, and it's like,
In a
I don't
way,
know.
then in a way, it's kind of like the same process, isn't it?
It's even more frustrating
Abstracted, right?
with this cosmic ray thing. The thing that really blows my mind is, so it's all probability based, right? Because we're getting bombarded by these rays at all times. Even if they get through the magnetic field of Earth,
Right.
the odds of it actually interacting with part of your body or part of the system's body is pretty low.
And in the right moment for it to do something, right? Because it could also
to
hit
do
a
something,
bit. It could
and
hit
then
a
do
bit that the
something
program's
positive.
never going to check. It could hit a bit that the program's never going to check again.
That's probably happening
Right.
all the time.
It could hit a bit, and then it just gets refreshed by the memory controller before it does anything.
Yeah.
It could hit a bit while the console's off.
Yeah, probably.
Probably happens all the time.
And the fact
Yeah.
that it ended up being beneficial is crazy, because if that happens to a human, that's very bad. That could screw you up. Like, why was it such a positive effect in this situation and didn't just like turn the machine off or something? Like, it could have been so many different things, and for
maybe it's
all these
possible
things
that
to line up.
Yeah, maybe it's possible that a bit flip could crash a system, right? Because
Yeah,
like
I'm just
if it gets, if it
spitballing.
has- yeah, I mean, I think it can happen in like a negative way, though, right? Not just in a
Mhm.
negative way that maybe has to do with like game mechanics, like maybe a bit flips and now you like can't progress or something. But it could, maybe it could even just crash the software, right? Like it just
You probably
throws an
don't hear
error
those
and-
stories though, because
No, because
they're
you just think the
boring or
software
whatever.
crashed, and no one's like,
Yeah.
"Why'd the game crash?" They just restart it and keep
Right.
playing, and just game's a little unstable. I don't know.
Yeah, never think about it again. I heard that's why Cyberpunk was so bad. Lots and
Got hit
lots
with
of
so many
cosmic
cosmic
rays.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say, do you think cosmic rays are to blame for my Final Fantasy II cart resetting my save data?
You did live in space when you were 12, right?
Yeah. Well, no. This
Yeah,
happened
so-
recently.
Okay.
Maybe the battery's bad.
No, I replaced the battery. See, this is a mystery, but I'm pretty sure I solved this mystery. And just for viewers at home, it's not an exciting thing. I did some research on it and found out turning on and off a Super Nintendo really fast can flash the RAM of old games, and I'm pretty sure I just flashed the RAM of the cart like a dummy because I was trying to get it to start because my Final Fantasy II cart sometimes takes some going. So
My next question was, were you in a sauna or on a hot plate?
no.
Is
No,
your
it was in my
Super
window
Nintendo on a
though,
hot
and it was the middle of summer, so
That,
maybe it got.
I mean, heats up for
Maybe.
sure.
Maybe, yeah. So
Yeah.
Adam,
Andrew-
I want to ask you. Oh,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask Andrew what he puts on hot plates.
Nothing anymore. I was going to ask you, and this is maybe not a serious question. I had 3 questions, one of which is not serious, 2 of which are.
Thanks for
The
warning.
first being, does this have any relation to the original Ray's or famous Ray's in New York, the pizza place? And then,
Interesting. I think we might have one of those in Hamilton now, if it's been chainified. Yes, continue.
oh, okay. So then my other questions, can you actually prevent this in a lab environment? Like,
Oh
if
yeah.
you were in a completely, say, leaded room, like, is that something that people do? And then the other flip side is knowing that, but can you simulate cosmic rays by like sticking a magnet on something?
Can we put it inside a particle accelerator?
Oh, true.
So yeah, a leaded room would work if you get one of those lead smocks that they put over your crotch when you go to the dentist,
Friends,
and
right?
draped that over top of your system. That would help.
Cool.
And that's because lead is such a dense atomically. Everything is so close together that the higher probability of the ray hitting one of those things. And if it hits that, then it's not a big deal. And simulating it or making it happen through another means, particle accelerator would work. You'd have to be able to aim the thing. But you could imagine other forms of like discharging like an electric discharge in a very targeted manner. Like if you had a really pointy needle or something, you could probably do something of that sort.
Oh, cool.
You could probably also make, well, yeah, little particle accelerator would be all right. They do that. That is a sort of an experimental process they do to try to figure out what the atomic structure of certain crystals and things are. They'll like take their little crystal and they'll stick it on a platform and they'll fire a bunch of charged particles at it and watch how they bounce off.
I have actually heard of that, yeah. To identify, like, you do that to identify, like, if like a gem is what somebody says it is, or is fake or whatever, right? Don't like jewelers do that?
So we got to shoot one of these.
So
at Super Mario.
So is that what you do? Actually, you get one of those and you just aim it at where the RAM chip is on the console.
just hope.
Yes. See if it reproduces the.
You have to be a real eagle eye.
So just like everything we talked about, playing the game in space, on a plane or whatever, right? Like it wouldn't end up flying long term. Like if it can't really just be done with hands on the controller, it probably is not going to fly. But it's interesting to find out if that's a way it could be reproduced.
Yeah, I think if you did that, you'd probably end up with some of these mistaken bit flip type things that we were just talking about, like some sort of problem happening before you actually get to the good thing.
Yeah, probably.
I can think of a way to make this economical and a good vacation at the same time.
Oh no.
So you have to be based in North America. Because also this is going back to Ben saying you want to try and reproduce it on a Japanese version of the game. You fly to Japan. Sure. You go to a vintage store. You buy the game. You fly back to North America. The flight tends to go up towards Alaska, so you're pretty high up on the poles. You can basically get a vacation out of the deal, get your original console, be thousands of feet in the air towards the pole.
I have bad news for you, Andrew.
Oh.
I think the console will just initialize the RAM when you power it on once you get home.
Ooh, fair enough.
Do you know why you fly up near Alaska and stuff when you do those big trips? It's because once you start going back to like North America, it's down, so you can just sort of coast.
What?
You're
joking, right?
You're higher up, so then you can just kind of coast down from Alaska down to North America. It's just like faster.
You're treating latitude like it's altitude, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
I want to actually ask you, when Andrew was asking about simulating it, just to throw another thought out there, like, could it be simulated with a different like type of radiation that has a similar effect? Like, is there like a sort, like a radioactive thing that is like available or accessible on Earth that could just be like used to shoot a ray at something? I guess that is again what the collider kind of is doing.
Yeah, one of these accelerators would do the job.
It is, maybe not.
But you could also just put. Remember, I told that story about the watch face.
The watch, right? That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, you could just put something that is sort of passively emitting some radiation. Fun fact: you can measure radiation from table salt that you buy in the store, and bananas. Those come up.
Okay.
Reasonable.
I eat a lot of bananas. Is this a problem?
I feel like I heard about this with bananas before, actually, for some reason.
Yeah, there's just like a lot of little sources of ionized particles and stuff.
Threw out there. Oh, okay, that's what it is.
The salt thing is because they add iodine, I believe, to table salt, which is like for your health. Apparently, people don't get enough iodine, so this has been like a. So you don't
kind of like putting vitamin D in milk.
Yeah, so you don't get goiters or something. Oh, actually, the milk thing. Final little anecdote I have about cosmic rays. I had a friend in high school.
Relevant?
Yeah. Actually, you guys might know this person. I had a friend in high school, and we had a 2-day long argument about vitamin D and the sun. It was her theory that the sun's cosmic rays contained the vitamin D, and it traveled through space, and entered you through skin. Like vitamin D was in
The sun.
The
in the
sun's
sun.
radiation.
This is the delivery mechanism, the sun itself.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think that's how it works. I think the sun helps you produce it inside your own body. I don't think there's vitamin D in the air.
Does it cause a reaction
Yeah.
It's Sunny D.
that like creates? I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I mean, can confirm vitamin D doesn't come from the sun.
Okay.
That definitely doesn't happen. But she's now a doctor, so I think she knows better than I do where it comes from. But
Okay.
hopefully she...
From the sun.
You should reach out and ask. Hey, by the way, remember that conversation? Did you ever find out? All right. Cool. So I want to ask you, like, actually, kind of like timekeeping sort of thing. Like, are you? I think I'm guessing that we've ran way past your regular sort of time frame for these episodes, right?
Yeah, that notification sound was actually... it just said that my bedtime starts in 15 minutes.
I sort of wanted to say, like, does anyone have anything else that they maybe want to cover that is like specifically related to like cosmic rays, speedrunning, bit flips, anything like that?
I was just going to say, do you think that they could... So we got these jeweler lasers, these like, jewelry identifying cosmic ray emitters, if you will. What if there's a category where you set that up and you have it shoot at intervals, and you just... It's like the speed run is try to complete your run as this thing fries your game.
Hmm.
Like,
Okay.
it's just like... It's like randomizer, but what it's randomizing is like glitches.
Actually, there's a channel I know on YouTube. They don't speedrun them, but the channel is Vinesauce, and one of the things that the person who runs Vinesauce does is corruptions where they open up the ROM of the game, which is like a game represented as like data that is... It's called a ROM because in cartridges it literally comes off of the ROM, which is one of the chips on the cart where the game code is stored. Where he opens the ROM and modifies like as many bits as he can get away with the game still working, and like just observes what kind of crazy results you get. And when you go changing a lot, you can get some pretty, honestly, sometimes terrifying results. A lot of like distorted imagery and text and things that you really kind of don't want to be seeing.
Right.
It reminds me
And
of all
usually
those
the
like
games
cursed
eventually
stories
crash.
of NES games from like being a kid. It's like, oh, did you play the Friday the 13th game? If you do this, this,
like
and this,
the kind
then
of horror, creepy. Yeah, that's like the creepy past stuff. And
yeah.
Ooh.
we
I
actually
have,
covered that on our podcast once,
I have a good...
Yeah,
loosely.
I remember
That's a
where I
good
was
game.
listening to that.
I have a good Game Boy corruption that's happened. So I have Pokemon Red twice, and one of them doesn't work. That's why I have two of them. And I've taken the battery out and let the RAM, I would assume, die, because it uses the battery to keep the RAM alive. That's where it stores your save file. It's hilarious. And then I put a new battery in, and it's still corrupted, and I have no idea what's wrong with it. And I have not seen this mentioned literally anywhere on the internet. It's not a glitch. It's not a speedrun thing. If you load it up, it'll load. It's fine. You go new game, because that's all there is, because I've cleared the data. And it just plays the... and I'm not even joking. It plays what sounds like a really slow, high-pitched version of... what's the town with the spooky town? What's it called?
Lavender Town.
Yeah, it plays that.
It's
And,
very interesting because a lot of the Pokemon creepypasta centers around Lavender Town as well.
So it plays that, and Oak's there, and all of the writing in the thing is gibberish, like overflow, like missing number letters instead of actually being like real letters, and it occasionally plays like Zubat sounds at random intervals, and it just never starts. It's still corrupted, and I've tried clearing the RAM. I have no idea what's wrong with it. Could this be a cosmic ray corruption?
I mean, maybe. I think more likely it's probably like left on a hot plate too long and like fried one of the wires or something.
It's like a...
I could heat it up.
It's like
Put
a
it in the microwave.
20-something-year-old... Yeah, it's like a 20-something-year-old cartridge, right? Like maybe it's honestly just kind of degrading.
It's hilarious, though. I should record it. And
Yeah,
You
should.
should record it, yeah.
because it's hilarious.
So I want to ask if this topic if you think that like anything really that has kind of run its course, I had a bit of an idea to present to Adam and Andrew specifically.
Yeah.
How
I'm
dare
listening.
Okay. So I was sort of thinking that because Colin and I, are sort of here, like we're here to engage with your topic, Adam, but we're also sort of representing our podcast, which is This Podcast Cannot Continue. And one of the fun activities that we do every episode is Colin and I will talk to each other after our specific topics, briefly about like what is sort of like a game on your backlog, right? And a backlog is just like, what you're interested in playing, what you might want to like pick up, or something you've been thinking about, or something you just haven't got around to. And it doesn't have to be some profound reason. It could literally just be, I haven't made the time for it or whatever. But I wanted to kind of say, like, Colin and I have answered that question so many times between each other on the podcast that we could probably sit this one out and don't really need to answer it. But I want to sort of say in sort of like TPCC tradition, I just want to kind of throw out the question to you guys. So Adam and Andrew, is there like a game that maybe you haven't got around to, or is on your backlog, or just something you're interested in, and briefly how come it is on your backlog?
Can a backlog be something that I'm playing but haven't finished yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've done that.
We're pretty loose on this definition.
It's a very loose definition.
If you're on your way to finishing it right now, though, I would maybe say maybe not a backlog item because you're actually currently playing it. If it's like something that you have like, like I just never beat the final boss and I mean to go back to it, that's a good candidate. But also, say whatever you want. It doesn't matter.
It's not that serious.
I mean, for me right now, it's probably Bloodborne. I meant to play it for years, didn't play it because I didn't have a PS4. Now that I've got the PS5 and it was free, I was really excited to play it. And all it's done is taught me that anytime there's a Souls game, I rely on a great shield and a magic staff to shoot things from a distance and not take damage. And this game
doesn't let you do that.
Yeah, you're gonna have a bad time on that one.
Oh yeah, it forces you to not have a shield and get up close and personal. There's not really a lot of magic that I've seen.
Are you getting better? Are you finding that you're getting like better at the game though?
Yes and no. It's on my backlog because I pretty much just got permanently stuck at a boss that I was unable to kill, which I think is Vicar Amelia.
Oh yeah.
And so it pretty much just took a backseat to everything else I was playing because I cannot beat it.
Fair enough.
If I can toss you a tiny little bit of perhaps unsolicited advice on that, your first encounter, you do have to complete that encounter, but when you first encounter Vicar Amelia, you are not necessarily at a choke point yet. Possibly there could be other locations or ways that you may explore and possibly power yourself up a little bit more. And yeah, because I guess to keep it very brief, there are other places that may be accessible to you at the current time that if you explore them you might benefit from that.
Okay, maybe I will check this out.
Adam? Oh, sorry.
I was just saying it's one of those games where even leveling up doesn't necessarily give you the advantage you want. And I find that it's often like just kind of learning the tricks and kind of setting aside the time to learn the boss patterns.
Yeah.
The boss patterns. I have a sorry admission to make is I'm still not done Nier Automata.
How dare you?
I know.
I'm just kidding.
So that's like on the front log and the backlog. I finished like I got like 1.5 endings or something. I'm now playing as the little boy.
Right.
I'm now 9s, yeah. And I'm maybe like a third of the way through you're replaying the story to some extent. Like the
You're
original.
seeing it from the other perspective now.
Yeah, so I'm about like a third of the way through that original like storyline. I'm sure there's going to be different content that pops up and stuff throughout it, but that's on the immediate backlog. But I have a save file started on Chrono Trigger, which I have to actually play.
You have, as far as I know, you've started that game a lot of times.
Yeah. So Andrea right now is playing it, so she's she'll come home from work at like 3 a.m., throw on some Chrono Trigger, so I'll wake up and see some of it and stuff. But I'm letting her have it. I just went through the trial.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. Were you guilty or were you innocent?
I was innocent.
That's good. Yeah.
Just kidding.
I think
You're always guilty, aren't you?
No,
you can be
you can
innocent,
make it innocent.
but
I'll still toss you in the slammer.
it's a little tough because like a lot of the what you're taught or sort of what you learn when you play JRPGs is to kind of interact with everything, and so like it's really easy to like take a bite of the old man sandwich or like certain things like that because you don't really think twice about it. But it is possible to do none of those things and essentially be innocent. But if I remember correctly, like the Chancellor is basically corrupt and just jails you anyway.
You get different dialogue though. It's like you're supposed to be. It's like they make it really funny. It's just like he's gonna get like community service, and they drag him away, and then they drag you there, and just like I thought this guy's supposed to get community service, and the Chancellor's like, no, we're executing him tomorrow. And Chrono's like, wait, what?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, interesting.
Flavor dialogue.
Well, thank you, Adam, for indulging the question. I know it's our tradition and not yours, but I just kind of wanted to bring a little of that flavor to the table.
I was jokingly going to say that on my backlog is the New York Times crossword app. That counts, right?
Absolutely.
Sure.
I am not here to cred check or gatekeep gaming.
That's a video game.
If it's a game, and you play it, by all means.
You know what's on my backlog that came up in an actual discussion? It's a game that I've seen a lot. I've never played it. I'm really curious about it. Backgammon.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't know how it works, but it seems like it could be neat. And I mean physical backgammon.
Yeah, I like the board. The board looks cool.
Yeah,
I think I played. Let's go ahead.
I was gonna say it's a mystery to me. I have no idea how to play it.
I think I played it with my grandma as a kid, but I can't remember how it works.
It's backgammon, right? Did I say backgammon?
Yeah, it's the one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. It's the one that has like I think it has like red and black triangle, like very thin triangles and little round pieces that. I don't remember how it works though, unfortunately.
Are you wait? Are you saying Bakuman? That's you want?
Yes. Yes. The one.
I felt like Andrew there.
Those are the roly
that was a very
animals. They pop up or something.
Style moment.
There's cards involved.
Bakuman. Cool. Yeah, that was. I love listening to your backlog section. It inspires me to add things to my ever-growing wish list. Yeah. Where can we find you guys? What? We want more of this. Where do we find you?
Colin, do the honors if you want.
Yeah. So me and Ben are This Podcast Cannot Continue. You can find us on most streaming platforms. We're on Spotify. We're on Amazon Audible. We're on iTunes, Deezer. I think we're on iHeart now. And you can find us at TPCC _podcast on Twitter. And This Podcast Cannot Continue on YouTube, where we post all of our podcast episodes in just like a place card, and you can listen to them on YouTube if you want. We also got some other video content that we're playing around with. We have some reacts videos to some big announcements, E3, that kind of stuff. And in addition to that, there's some gameplay stuff going on. We're building that content out, but the main focus is the podcast, and we try to get 3 to 4 episodes out a month. Usually we average 3. And yeah, you can find us most places. I know, Ben, you have your own sort of like other way to find you, so feel free to plug that as well.
I actually also quickly want to add that sometimes some of the video and gameplay content we do on This Podcast Cannot Continue also goes out on Twitch, and the Twitch URL is also This Podcast Cannot Continue, kind of all one word, no spaces type of thing. For myself as well, just like individually, I have also been doing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV streaming, so it's like very narrowed in on one game. But if you just happen to be listening and happen to play or are interested in Final Fantasy XIV, on twitch.tv/Kawa, KAWAXIV, on that channel, I broadcast Final Fantasy XIV, and I also tweet individually, sometimes about 14, and a lot of the times about other things on the same username on Twitter.
Andrew, where can we find you, and how much do you make per year?
I'm not at liberty to discuss
Either of those
I'm
things.
just a guy. I'm just a guy living his life. But if you've been interested in, as we alluded to before, our band Boonie, which is myself, Colin, and Ben, who have been talking and or listening throughout this show, you can find us at Boonie.Rocks. That's BOONIE.ROCKS. You can also find us on Twitter, though we're not super active right now. There have been some events over the last year that have prevented shows from happening. You might be aware of it, but we hope to be back soon. Yeah.
You know, you are kind of like the main tweeter on the Boonie Band Twitter, so I mean, it's fair enough to say that if someone really wants to find you specifically, that's the way to go.
That's true. You need a tweeter on the Twitter, and I am that twit.
I love it.
Well, when you put it like that.
Yeah, so eloquent.
He is elegant. That's true. Yeah, go on.
Could I leave us off on a potential glitch? Not really a speedrun thing, but taking us full circle back to Harvest Moon.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So classic Friends of Mineral Town glitch for all of us, kind of intentionally put into the game by the developers. If you ever start the TV at 444, it will just lock up the Game Boy Color and prevent you from going any further in the game. It's equivalent to, like, in English, like 666 kind of being like a satanic thing.
Oh yeah, it is, because it sounds like what is it? The word
It
for
sounds
four?
like death.
Yeah, thank you. That's right.
So they, to spook players, I guess, they set it up so that 444 would stop you from playing the game.
Get your Nissan she. That's it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So if you get to 444, start it, your only option is to shut it down.
Wow.
Wild.
Quick fact check there, though, sir. Friends of Mineral Town is on the Game Boy Advance.
My bad.
Just kidding. I mean, it is, but like I was trying to call you.
That's
How dare you cred?
How dare you?
How dare you?
How dare me do that to you?
I'm not the professional video game podcaster. This is what I'm doing.
Being very generous with the word professional.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, thank you, Adam, for having this unprofessional.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here.
This was a lot of fun.